X-Men 97 Season 2 is finally coming out on July 1st, 2026, after keeping us waiting for so long. And while Marvel has not officially confirmed Juggernaut for the season, his name keeps popping up whenever you go into fan conversations. I mean, it kind of makes sense, right? The big guy with a helmet who doesn't go down easily? Of course, he's someone we all talk about. But here's the thing. There's so much more to him than that. Physiologically speaking, the way his body works is exceptional. So today, I'll break it down for you and show you exactly how his body works. One insane physiology fact at a time.
Now I'm gonna shove the red guy up the old guy.
He's not a mutant, and that changes everything about how his body works. This is something a lot of people get wrong when they first see Cain Marko. Since X-Men is largely about mutants, humans, and the conflict between them, I completely understand why people assume he has the X gene. But Cain Marko, our resident big boy, is not a mutant. He was originally a regular human whose body was mystically transformed by the power of Cyttorak. Cain and his stepbrother Charles Xavier were serving in the same military unit in Asia when Cain deserted under fire. Charles followed him into a cave hoping to convince him to return. Inside that cave was the Temple of Cyttorak. Cain found a glowing ruby and, like most curious horror movie protagonists, read its inscription aloud. The wording has varied slightly across retellings, but its meaning was essentially this: whoever touches this gem shall possess the power of the crimson bands of Cyttorak. Henceforth, you who read these words shall become forevermore a human juggernaut. Immediately afterward, artillery fire caused the cave to collapse. Charles escaped. Cain did not. But Cain no longer needed to fear the falling rock because the transformation had already begun. This source of power matters because his abilities are mystical rather than genetic. Devices and powers specifically designed to surpass mutant abilities do not necessarily switch off Cain Marko's connection to Cyttorak because he has no X gene to suppress. That doesn't mean absolutely nothing can weaken him. Magic, power removal, psychic attacks, or Cyttorak himself can interfere with his abilities. But conventional mutant suppression is not automatically the answer. When Juggernaut first appeared in X-Men issue 12, he was already fully transformed by the gem's power. He was not an evolved mutant, he was a human avatar carrying the power of a mystical god. The Crimson Gem is connected to him, but it's not literally inside every cell. In the earlier comics, the Crimson Gem of Cyttorak appeared to be an external artifact. Cain touched it, became Juggernaut, and walked away with the power. Later stories expanded that connection, and established that Cain's abilities depended on his relationship with Cyttorak and the mystical energy granted through the gem. However, it would be inaccurate to claim that the physical gem permanently dissolved into Cain's cells until no separate artifact remained. The gem has been stolen, broken, restored, divided, and used to empower different vessels throughout Marvel history. Colossus became Juggernaut. The living monolith received Cyttorak's power. Black Tom Cassidy temporarily gained a portion of it, and Justin Jin later received a fragment connected to his own family. So the gem is better understood as a conduit through which Cyttorak chooses and empowers an avatar. The energy transforms Cain's body so completely that it behaves as though the power is a part of it, but the relationship remains mystical, not biological. Another crucial detail is that Cain does not have absolute control over the source. Cyttorak has weakened him, stripped away his power, restored it, and increased it depending on whether Cain was deserving of the destructive role expected of the Juggernaut. So when you fight Cain, you're not only fighting a giant man, you're fighting a man whose body is connected to the different dimension and supported by an entity capable of adjusting the power output. That understandably makes landing a decisive blow very difficult. His body does not have the same needs as ours. Since Cyttorak's energy sustains Marko's transformed body, his physiology no longer depends on ordinary human necessities the same way ours does. He can function for extraordinarily long periods without food, water, sleep, or air. Human cells normally rely on metabolic process to produce energy. We break down carbohydrates, fats, and proteins to create ATP, which powers countless cellular functions. Juggernaut's body does not follow that ordinary limit while fully empowered. However, saying that crimson energy literally becomes ATP would be speculation rather than confirmed Marvel biology. The simpler explanation is that Cyttorak's magic sustains his body directly. A brilliant example appears in The Amazing Spider-Man issues 229 and 230. Spider-Man throws everything he can at Juggernaut but cannot overpower him. Peter eventually binds Cain and tricks him into stepping into a deep construction foundation filled with wet cement. Juggernaut sinks. The cement hardens around him. Anyone else trapped underneath that much concrete without air would die. But Peter knows Cain will survive. The cement is not an execution, it's only a temporary containment. Juggernaut eventually escapes because suffocation, starvation, and normal exhaustion cannot stop him while Cyttorak's power sustains his body. He may be dangerous, but you have to admit that's incredibly cool. Irresistible force embodiment is more than just a nickname. Calling Juggernaut an irresistible force sounds like a dramatic way of saying he's extremely strong, but the phrase describes something more specific. Once Juggernaut begins moving in a chosen direction, Cyttorak's enchantment makes that forward movement extremely difficult to stop. This should not be explained as an endlessly increasing kinetic field that multiplies with every step. His speed doesn't rise forever. His momentum doesn't keep doubling. Instead, his movement is mystically reinforced. He starts advancing. The power supports that advance, and most physical obstacles break before they convince him to stop. This is why Juggernaut can smash through reinforced buildings, thick walls, heavy machinery, and even mountains. Thor, Hulk, and other enormously powerful characters may be capable of matching Kane in a strength exchange under certain circumstances, but stopping his forward movement is a separate challenge. An opponent may be strong enough to hurt him and still fail to keep him from advancing. That's what makes the Juggernaut's enchantment so frightening. Strength is part of the equation, but the mystical rule behind his movement is what makes him truly unstoppable. He has multiple layers of defense. Looking at Juggernaut, it's easy to think that his defense comes entirely from his armor. I don't blame anyone for assuming that, but there's much more at work. First, Kane's transformed body is naturally superhumanly durable. His muscles, bones, skin, and internal structures can withstand forces that would completely destroy an ordinary person. Second, Cyttorak's power surrounds him with a mystical force field. This field protects Kane from enormous physical and energy attacks. Third, he wears his iconic Crimson Cosmos armor, another physical layer over his already protected body. However, the force field does not simply absorb every form of energy without limit. Its effectiveness varies depending on Kane's power level and the nature of the attack. In Thor issues 411 and 412, Thor eventually used Mjolnir's mystical energies to temporarily disrupt Juggernaut's force field. That allowed Thor to strike Kane directly. Even then, removing the field did not make Juggernaut an ordinary man. Kane still had his magically transformed body, armor, strength, and healing. That's the problem with fighting him. Breaking through one layer only reveals another. Kane's double helmet strategy is a brilliant move. Juggernaut's force field protects his body, his armor protects his force field, but neither automatically makes his mind immune to physical attacks. Since Kane's powers are mystical, conventional weapons, energy blasts, and physical force often fails to stop him. Telepathy is different. A psychic attack can bypass his muscles and target his consciousness directly. That's why the classic strategy against Juggernaut has often been to remove his helmet and let Professor X, Jean Grey, Psylocke, or another telepath attack his mind. This worked enough times that Kane adapted. In Uncanny X-Men issue number 218, Rogue, Psylocke, and Dazzler were among the heroes confronting Juggernaut. Dazzler blinded him. Rogue absorbed enough strength to remove the outer helmet. The X-Men believed Kane's mind was finally exposed, but underneath the helmet was a second protective skull cap. Kane had learned from previous encounters and added another layer of psychic protection. The team had to remove that layer before Psylocke could attack his mind effectively. Physiologically speaking, that teaches us something important. Cyttorak's power upgraded Kane's physical form almost beyond recognition. It strengthened its muscles, it reinforced his body, it gave him durability, stamina, and regeneration, but it did not automatically create an impenetrable mental fortress. Kane had to compensate for that weakness using armor and strategy. His healing factor is mystically powered. Juggernaut possesses a healing factor, but its source is fundamentally different from Wolverine's. Wolverine heals because his mutant biology rapidly regenerates damaged tissue. Kane heals because his transformed body is being sustained by Cyttorak's mystical power. His tissue still regenerates, but the force driving the repair comes from outside ordinary human biology. The practical difference becomes obvious when we look at the severity of the injuries Kane has survived. Shatterstar once stabbed the Juggernaut through both his eyes. Kane recovered. In the 1997 Juggernaut one-shot, the demon Spader stripped away Kane's flesh until he was reduced to almost entirely a skeleton, and Kane continued fighting. Once his connection and power were restored, his body completely returned. That is far beyond normal biological regeneration. A skeleton cannot manufacture an entire body without organs, blood vessels, nerves, or living tissue. The restoration works because magic preserves and creates Juggernaut's empowered physical pattern. That does not mean Kane cannot feel pain. He's reacted to injuries and suffered physically in multiple stories, but his durability and regeneration allow him to keep functioning through levels of trauma that would immediately kill almost anyone else. Just how strong is he? Kane is frequently described as possessing virtually limitless strength. But what does that actually mean? It doesn't mean that Marvel has mathematically confirmed that he could lift infinite amounts of weight. It means that his upper limit is exponentially difficult to define because his power depends on Cyttorak and his fluctuated over time. Juggernaut has fought Thor. He's battled Hulk. He has overpowered Colossus. He's traded blows with the Thing. He can create shockwaves through physical strikes and claps. He's bored through bedrock. He smashed through mountains and massive structures as though they were obstacles placed in his path rather than things meant to stop him. But it would be inaccurate to say that Juggernaut is automatically physically the strongest being on Earth. Hulk's strength can increase with rage. Thor possesses divine strength and powerful magic. Other cosmic beings exist on levels beyond Kane. The reason Juggernaut remains so dangerous is the complete package: enormous strength, nearly endless stamina, mystical durability, a force field, rapid healing, environmental self-sustenance, and movement that becomes almost impossible to halt once he commits to it. Whatever Kane's exact maximum strength may be, most opponents never survive long enough to discover it. Trion Juggernaut was a completely different level. Trion Juggernaut may look like Sidorak simply turned Kane's power up another notch, but that is not what happened. During a storyline beginning in X-Men issue 88 and continuing into Uncanny X-Men issue 369, Kane was manipulated into traveling to Korea by people connected to the cult of Chejo-do. He believed he might find another source of Sidorak's power. Instead, the cult used technology to drain Juggernaut's energy. That stolen energy became entangled with an interdimensional entity connected to the Trion gods. When the energy returned to Kane, the foreign entity entered him as well. Kane's body became enormously amplified. He grew to a gigantic size. He punched through dimensional barriers. Every major movement threatened surrounding reality. This was not your standard Juggernaut. It was Kane's body and Sidorak's connection being overloaded by another interdimensional force. The X-Men needed help from Prosh, a celestial created machine intelligence associated with X-Factor, and Ship, a being first introduced in Avengers issue 50. Once the Trion entity was removed, Kane returned to his usual form. So Trion Juggernaut shows what Kane's body can survive when filled with additional dimensional power. It does not prove that regular Juggernaut can casually push through reality whenever he wants. His official size has changed across different sources. Yeah, Juggernaut's huge, but his exact measurements have not remained completely consistent across every Marvel handbook, comic adaptation, and artist. Some reference sources have listed his empowered form at approximately 9 feet 5 inches tall and close to 1,900 pounds. Other official and semi-official profiles have used slightly different numbers, so the safest conclusion is that not one measurement is universally fixed. The important physiological fact is that Kane's transformation drastically increases his height, width, density, and mass. Normal Kane Marco is already a very large man. Juggernaut Kane becomes a towering superhuman whose proportions no ordinary skeleton or cardiovascular system could support. But the explanation that his cells divide and expand like a bowl becoming larger is speculative. Sidorak's power does not have to obey conservation of mass or gradual biological growth. The transformation is magical. Kane's body is rewritten directly into the form required of Sidorak's avatar. That's why his muscle mass, bone density, and total weight change without months or years of physical development. The body becomes whatever Juggernaut's enchantment requires. Killing him is no easy task. Sidorak's energy changed almost everything about Kane's physical limitations. Juggernaut can survive without air. He can endure crushing pressure. He can resist extreme cold and heat. He can survive burial, drowning, and environments that would kill an ordinary human. His body is also highly resistant to toxins, disease, and radiation while fully empowered. However, saying that nothing can affect him would go too far. Marvel contains magical diseases, god-forged toxins, cosmic radiation, reality-altering weapons, and supernatural effects capable of bypassing conventional durability. Juggernaut should therefore be described as extraordinarily resistant rather than universally immune to every threat imaginable. His body does not age normally while sustained by Sidorak. It gives him functional agelessness, although his power has been removed or altered at different times. The main weakness remains magical interference, loss of Sidorak's favor, powerful psychic attacks after his helmet is removed, and forces capable of disrupting the enchantment itself. Even then, damaging Kane is usually easier than permanently killing him. His body is a mystical vessel designed to continue. Did Juggernaut have kids? Under all that armor and cosmic-looking energy, Kane Marco remains biologically human. Nothing in Earth 616 canon definitively establishes that he's incapable of having children. But the Juggernaut power itself is not normally genetic. Kane didn't inherit it through his chromosomes. He acquired it through the Crimson Gem in Sidorak's mystical selection. In the alternate Marvel 2 comics line of Earth 982, Kane had a son named Zane Yama. Zane inherited a version of Juggernaut's power, and the hero became known as J2. However, that happened in an alternate universe with its own rules. It does not prove that a child born to Earth 616 Kane would automatically inherit his power. Sidorak could choose Kane's child. A fragment of the gem could pass through the family. A magical contract could affect the bloodline, but that would be mystical inheritance, not standard genetics. So yeah, Kane could potentially have children, but no, his child would not necessarily be born with Juggernaut muscles and a tiny red helmet. There's a new Juggernaut in town. One of the most exciting recent additions to Juggernaut's mythology is Jun Sung Justin Jin, also known as Kid Juggernaut. Justin is a Korean-Canadian teenager from Vancouver. His family had a connection to Sidorak's power before King Marco ever found the gem. Justin's grandfather had previously become a vessel of Sidorak, but rejected the destructive demands placed upon him. A fragment of the Crimson Gem remained connected to the family. Before Justin's father died, he sent that fragment to his estranged son. When Justin touched it, he became Kid Juggernaut. However, there are several important corrections to make. Justin did not receive all of Kane Marco's power. Kane did not become powerless because Justin transformed, and Justin did not permanently replace Kane as Sidorak's only avatar. Justin possesses power from a fragment of the gem. Kane remains active as Juggernaut. Marvel's mythology has already shown that Sidorak can empower more than one vessel or distribute portions of power under different circumstances. Justin's existence proves that Juggernaut is not strictly one person. It's a mantle and source of power that can take different forms depending on the chosen vessel. Kane remains the most famous Juggernaut. Justin represents a new heroic interpretation of that same destructive legacy. The few beings who have stopped the unstoppable Juggernaut. From everything we've discussed, we know Kane is extremely difficult to stop, but a small number of opponents have halted or disrupted him under extraordinary circumstances. Thor has interfered with Juggernaut's protection through Mjolnir's mystical power. During their confrontation in Thor issues 411 and 412, Thor temporarily neutralized Kane's force field and managed to battle him more directly. Another famous example involves War-Hulk. This was not World War Hulk. War-Hulk was Hulk after Apocalypse transformed him into his Horseman of War and augmented him with celestial technology. That enhanced Hulk possessed the strength and focused power necessary to stop Juggernaut's advance temporarily. Professor X and other powerful telepaths have also defeated Kane after removing his psychic protection, but that's not physically stopping his charge. It's bypassing his body and shutting down the mind and controlling it. Spider-Man stopped Kane by trapping him in wet cement. Again, that was not physically overpowering, it was environmental containment. So the list of reliable options remains short. Disrupt the magic, attack the mind, redirect his movement, remove the ground beneath him, trap him somewhere he can't gain leverage, or bring in someone carrying truly exceptional physical, mystical, or cosmic enhancement. Anything else usually ends with Juggernaut walking through it. So who and what is the Juggernaut? So here it is. Juggernaut's not a mutant. He's not a naturally occurring cosmic entity. He's a human being transformed into the avatar of Sidorak's destructive power. At a physical level, Kane's body is strengthened, sustained, and repaired through mystical energy. As a result, it remains near peak condition without depending on ordinary food, sleep, air, or recovery. He possesses several defensive layers, an empowered body, a mystical force field, physical armor, an outer helmet, and an inner skull cap designed to defend his mind. But Justin Jin's arrival does not mean Kane Marco has stopped being Juggernaut. It means Juggernaut was never only one biological entity. It was always a mystical mantle. Kane Marco simply remains the longest serving and most famous holder of that mantle. And that, my friends, is the actual physiology of the Juggernaut. With X-Men 97 Season 2 arriving on July 1st, 2026, I'm excited to see what Marvel has planned, although Juggernaut hasn't officially been confirmed for the season. Now that Kid Juggernaut's in town, I have to ask, are you Team Kane Marco or Team Justin Jin? Personally, still a Kane Marco fan. I cannot imagine anyone else completely replacing him as Juggernaut. And maybe that's simply because Kane has held the mantle for so long that his name and Juggernaut have become inseparable. You feel the same way? Let me know in the comments below. Like and comment, and as always, we'll see you next time. Stay safe, and as always, stay marvelous.